Welcome back to the Vibrant Soulful Wellness Podcast. This is your podcast for ideas, practices, and strategies for living and working more vibrantly and soulfully. I'm your host, Annie Barrett, and I guide individuals, groups, and workplaces toward higher health and well-being and greater fulfillment using tools of coaching, lifestyle medicine, habit change science, Ayurveda, and yoga. I'm glad you're here. In today's episode, I want to talk about how we can stay informed and connected to what's going on in the world and protect our mental well-being. So, in my last podcast, I was talking about how we're living in interesting times, and this word interesting times often translates as troubling times. There's a lot that's going on that's really hard. And most of us are feeling really bombarded with news coverage. A lot of this news is negative, upsetting, or it leaves us with feelings of uncertainty because there's a lot that's going on that's very uncertain. And all of this has an impact on our mental well-being, right? And I know that for all of us, the impulse to consume news, especially when there's a lot going on, can be difficult to resist. And when it's negative news, we often call this doom scrolling, right? There's this impulse to figure out what is going on, what's going on. And to a large extent, this is because as humans, we've evolved to have this thing called the negativity bias, right? It's this evolutionary wiring that we have that where we are wired to screen for and anticipate danger. And so to a large extent, this is like keeping our finger on the pulse. And there's this feeling that if I can just keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on, I'm going to feel more prepared, right? And certainly we do want to stay informed, especially when there's stuff that's affecting people that we know's lives or our own lives. But the feeling of the fear, sadness, anger, uncertainty, worry that can be triggered by the headlines that we're seeing can keep us stuck in this pattern of frequent monitoring that leads us to even more anxious scrolling, like, oh my gosh, what's happening now? What's happening now? And we've known this. We've maybe been in this pattern for a while now, maybe even back since the pandemic when many of us got into that habit of doom scrolling. What are the numbers like? What's going on in my household? What does this mean for me? And I guess what I want to do in today's podcast is talk about how, yes, we can and should stay informed, but how we can do this in a way that supports our mental well-being. And it particularly to think about how, when there is a lot of news coverage that is upsetting or negative, how that affects our mental well-being. We need to understand this. I was looking around to see what other people have put out that is helpful, and I found a really good resource that comes from Johns Hopkins, and this is their Johns Hopkins University Employee Assistance Program. They had a really good PDF that summarizes some of these issues in really clear ways. I'll put the link in this podcast, but it's basically recognizing that whenever we are consuming, especially watching news footage that is upsetting, that this really activates our body's fight or flight response. And particularly it happens when we're watching it because when we're involving more senses, especially the sense of sight, it can activate it even more. When this happens, adrenaline gets released and also the stress hormone cortisol. And when our bodies are in this state, they're in a stress activation state, we experience the same symptoms we might experience if we were under threat. So even if we're reading about it, it's not necessarily us, we feel like we're under threat. And some of these symptoms are recognizing that, oh, wow, my heart is racing, my breathing has changed. Maybe I'm holding my breath. I might even feel a little bit upset in my stomach. So just recognizing, oh, I'm experiencing this fight or flight response by watching the news right now. And a recognition that when we're increasing our consumption of news that is difficult, negative, that this does increase depression and anxiety symptoms in the body. There's a study that showed that people, after consuming only 14 minutes of news consumption, showed an increase in symptoms of anxiety and depression. And these symptoms are worse when people feel like they don't have an ability to improve the situation that they're in. They feel stuck. And then the last one is that from this Johns Hopkins report is that when we're relying on social media for our news, this actually drives addictive behavior because we know that more than 50% of Americans receive their news via social media. and that a lot of these headlines are clickbait, and that there's algorithms set up that are designed to keep us coming back for more and more, making it difficult to actually get off that app. And so just recognizing that there is addiction built in to those social media sites that are going to keep us going there. So with all of that, how can we protect our mental well-being? So we're going to talk about some ways we can do that. And the first one is to be aware of what exactly is triggering us. Sometimes it's a particular topic. And there's a lot of topics, right, that could be triggering us right now. For some of us, it'll be around equity issues or around justice issues. For others of us, it might be global topics or topics related to who might be losing work or what's happening with immigration. There's a variety of topics. Notice which topics are activating you and recognize how much you're reading or consuming these. And we'll talk about how we can limit this, how we can set limits, but just recognizing, oh, wow, this is the topic that really has me triggered, and knowing that. And then let's be mindful of our news sources. So if we're just using social media, we know there's algorithms that are set up to keep bringing the same kind of news to us. Let's make sure that the news that we are getting is accurate and provides a variety of perspectives. And I'm not going to talk about exactly the ways to do that. You're going to have to figure out what is the news source that you trust, but pick sources that you trust that offer a variety of perspectives and they're actually covering the situation with truth and accuracy. And then let's be mindful of how we're consuming the news in general. So like I said, if we're watching footage of something, that can actually trigger in us a fight or flight response, which means that we may want to read the news or listen to that might be easier on our minds and bodies than watching. So that's important. How can we stay informed without triggering? Maybe for you, listening or reading might be better than watching. And then let's be really selective and mindful with how we're engaging with the news. So that is awareness of when I engage with the news, when I read the headlines, how I get my news, where I am when I'm getting the news. Am I in my car? Am I in my kitchen? Am I in my bedroom? Is it 6 a.m.? Is it midnight? And let's pay attention to our bodies and our breath, because to a large extent, that's going to let us know what's happening. We can feel if our breath is changing, if I feel like I'm constricting, I'm starting to hunch my shoulders, or I'm starting to recognize I'm holding my breath, I'm not really breathing. We need to pay attention, because actually consuming the news is somatic. Maybe we think it's happening on the level of our brains, but it's actually happening on the level of our bodies, our emotional body and physical bodies as well. So we need to really be mindfulness to recognizing that. And then this gets into setting some boundaries. So we need to have some times in which we are not. It's not 24/7. We need to have times in which we are not engaging with the news. And part of a larger conversation, I talk about digital well-being. I do some talks on digital well-being. It's a bigger conversation around how we're dealing with our digital devices. But right now, we'll keep the conversation focused on how we're consuming the news. I recommend that you start and end your day free of looking at the news headlines, which means that I recommend that you have phone free, because phone is how many of us are consuming the news these days, bedtimes, and screen free waking up and going to sleep time. So the phone is not the last thing that you touch or look at before you go to bed. It's not the first thing that you pick up. So you have some buffers around this. And additionally, let's have device-free meal times. Let's have meal times where we're also not doom scrolling. And it's good to have places in our house where we are not consuming digital media, where we're not consuming devices, places where we go that are meant to be relaxing places. The phone is left out of that room. And also when we're spending time with others. So meal times with others or engaging, socializing with others, it's really nice to not be having our phones with us, because if we're used to that, remember, there's many addictive behaviors that are built into using a phone. And so if we have some space away from those, that's going to be good. All right, so setting some strong boundaries, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we talk about routines that can help us, but strong boundaries around when you're engaging with news. And because we're going to be better off if we can take action, because I think when we feel like we're helpless, that tends to increase feelings of anxiety and depression. So we need to feel like there is some agency we have, some kind of action that we can take. So figuring out exactly, okay, these are the issues that I care about a lot. Take action by figuring out, is there a group that's working on these issues? And how can I get involved? Is there a way that I can get involved with people, or getting involved through making a phone call, taking action? You want to feel empowered about making change instead of feeling helpless about the world around you. So that is, find people. And remember that we are not meant to go it alone. It's on no one's shoulder to fix the world. Together in community with other people, we can make big things happen. So get involved in a positive way and recognize that that's going to help you. The next tip I have is both thinking, which is a balanced way of thinking, not just, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, it's negative, or I'm going to be Pollyannish about it and not pay attention to the news. No, it's both. The world is tough out there. There are things that I'm upset about, and I can do things that are positive. I can spend time with people that are positive. I can take care of myself and others and do things that are good for me and others in these ways. Both, it's not one or the other, it's both. And sometimes we have to really build on the and part, which is positive, which is I can take action and I can enhance optimism in my life by doing things that bring me joy and satisfaction. What are those things? We need to think about those are. Oftentimes they're going to be social activities, just being around other people. We recognize that positive relationships are stress regulators. So whether that's just a positive hit of meeting up with a friend for coffee or for a walk, whether that's a positive hit of going to a regular class with other people, whether that's a positive hit of taking some time to connect with my coworkers, that's important to be social. It's also really important to move our bodies. One of the ways in which we release stress that's accumulated in the day is by moving our bodies. So making sure that we are getting some movement in during the day. And even I often talk about movement practices or exercises that we can do before and after the workday, but also it's the things that we're doing during the day. Taking stretch breaks, going for a walk up and down the hall or walk around the block, taking time away to move our bodies during the day is important. Making sure that we have time for creative hobbies. What's your creative hobby? Do you like to cook? Do you like to knit? Do you like to make stuff with your hands? Do you like to do art? That's important. Gratitude practices. Gratitude practices are a huge way to shift our mood from being one of deep in the dump to, oh, wow, there's actually things that are going well. When we can name 5 things that we're grateful for, people, opportunities, experiences, nature, all of those things are going to help elevate our mood. And yeah, things like maybe we have spiritual practices, spending time with a pet, journaling, so many different things that can bring us joy and optimism. So this comes down to really doubling down on these daily well-being routines. Maybe some of these already are well-being routines for you. Exercise might be a well-being routine for you. Mindfulness or meditation practices might be a daily well-being routine for you. Cooking, spending time with others. So I really recommend that particularly you think about how you want to start and end your day. So we already talked about not starting and ending our day with news, or even particularly not with our devices. Can we start and end our day in ways that are nourishing and that are going to be balancing for our bodies and minds and hearts? It's about protecting our rest and sleep at night and starting in our day in a way that allows us to feel calm on top of things and energized in the beginning of the day. So again, you want to think of what you do at the beginning and end of the day as like bookends of your day that's going to balance and harmonize what might be unpredictable in the middle. So whether for you that's a breathing practice that you do at the beginning and end of the day, whether it's gratitude practices, whether it's reading an uplifting book, showering, bath, snuggling with pets or people, having some quiet time with your cup of tea or cup of coffee and watching the sunrise or the sunset or the birds. You really want to have some well-being routines that are buffers for the day and buffers for the world. So there's a lot of ideas out there that I hope I've shared with you today, and I'm sure you're going to have some others. I'd love to hear what you're doing to protect your mental well-being. Yes, the news, the constant news coverage is hard to escape from. And yes, we can set limits. We can be able to positively engage with the world around us, know what's going on, take action, and we can protect ourselves from over consuming media. We can do this through self-care, setting up some guardrails for ourselves. We can also do this through team care, leading our households, leading our workplaces to do the same. Yes, we can do this. We can be engaged in the world and we can take care of ourselves. I look forward to hearing about how you're choosing to do this. And I look forward to coming back and continuing this conversation with you. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Vibrant Soulful Wellness Podcast. And if you like this and you want to hear more episodes, you can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify. If you are on Spotify, you can also head over to my website, www.vibrantsoulful.com, where you can see these podcast episodes, get on my weekly newsletter, and enjoy a lot of other wellness resources. These are important times for us to stick together and share our well-being strategies with one another. And I'm happy to have you joining me here for this. Look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for tuning in.